Alrighty, guys. So we will definitely talk more about Captain America: Brave New World as this episode goes on. But before we do any of that, I wanted to touch on one aspect of the film that seems to be garnering some discussion, and really it's been a trend in the MCU going back a little ways. So this is going to be a discussion on the post-credit scene of not just Captain America: Brave New World, but just in general, the state of the MCU and their post-credit scene. So if you have not seen Captain America: Brave New World, this segment will contain spoilers for the post-credit scene and, some of the details about the ending of the film, but generally just focusing in on the post-credit scene of Captain America: Brave New World, and of course, post-credit scenes, spoilers, and spoilers for all the other MCU projects that we've gotten thus far. So if you don't want to know, then just feel free to hop off and come back and watch this segment later once you have seen the film. Let's talk about MCU post-credit scenes. So first of all, Captain America: Brave New World comes out, and I have my thoughts on it, and we'll talk about some maybe updated thoughts, updated feelings later on in the episode. But you can go check out also my initial review, my non-spoiler and spoiler review of Captain America: Brave New World. But, one thing that people talked about, I think mostly positively, was that, the post-credit scene, or not mostly positively, mostly negatively, was that, the post-credit scene was kind of a dud. And, there were some people who were like, yeah, well, it says something about, the future of the MCU and whatnot. And basically, for those of you who are catching up, if you haven't seen the film and you just want to know what the post-credit scene was, the post-credit scene is basically Sam Wilson returning to the raft, because the film ends with Sam Wilson in the raft with a questionably CGI Betty Ross, confronting her father, not confronting her father, rather, but, having a reunion with her father, Thunderbolt Ross, and he is in the raft at this point. And then the end of the film, Sam Wilson, basically, that's it. He has a conversation with Joaquin Torres. The film ends, and then he's right back into the raft in the post-credit scene to talk to the leader, who was not revealed to be there in that scene with Thunderbolt Ross, because both of those scenes probably were reshot, I would say. Although, who's to say? Because there's been speculation, and I think it's fairly obvious that Thunderbolt Ross was intended to die in the movie before they probably reshot it, because maybe they have some plans, going forward into the MCU. Who even knows about that? Anyways, so the post-credit scene is him, Sam Wilson, talking to the leader, who is in the raft as well. And also Zemo is hanging out there, although we didn't get to see him. I would have liked to have seen Daniel Brühl there, but alas. And anyways, the post-credit scene is Sam being like, so, what's going on? And leader is like, well, there's possibilities, and you better be careful for the others. Which, by the way, when I was in the theaters, I said this before, I really thought he was going to say Doom. He was like, you better be ready for Doom. And I would have been like, okay, that's still a little bit on the nose, and it's still a little bit like, yeah, I mean, sure. But at least it would have been something, right? But instead he says the others, and I think that's lame, honestly. But, that brings up a question that I've been wanting to talk about for a little bit now, is what's going on with these MCU post-credit scenes and what isn't working? Because I think even for those of us, and I count myself in this group, who are generally big MCU fans and who think that, look, Phase 4 and Phase 5 has not been perfect. And I think, because Phases 1 through 3 were about as close to perfect as you could get, relatively speaking, obviously no movie is perfect and whatnot, and there are definitely some duds in there, in my opinion. But because Phase 4 and Phase 5 have just been so okay in general, with some misses and some hits and then some okay films in there, I think, it's put a spotlight on some of the things that aren't working, and the post-credit scenes are definitely one of them. And I think even, like I said, even for those of us who are big fans of the MCU, and who think Phase 4 and Phase 5 deserve a little better than the kind of criticism that they're getting, although it's understandable, I think we can all agree that the post-credit scenes have just been odd, and they just haven't been working, right? And I wanted to kind of dissect it a little bit. Let's go through a lot of the post-credit scenes, if not all of them, through Phases 4 and 5, and see, what they were setting up and what we can kind of glean from all of them. So first of all, let's start out with WandaVision. I think the WandaVision post-credit scenes were actually pretty solid, honestly. You had one where Monica Rambeau was being pointed up to space, so yeah, that sets up a future project that comes out in a couple of years with the Marvels. And to be fair, it's the Marvels, right? That film was supposed to come out much sooner than that, with delays and whatnot. So, that was a scene directly leading into a film. And of course, the other post-credit scene was Wanda Maximoff reading The Darkhold, and that was going to lead directly into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So actually, I think WandaVision was fairly solid in having post-credit scenes that seem to matter for the future of the MCU. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, on the other hand, has had a dangling thread. Sharon Carter is the power broker. And that's it. That's all we got there. Loki, I don't think really had anything there, so I think Loki will leave alone. And then we have Black Widow. Black Widow, again, very solid post-credit scene, right? Very solid post-credit scene, where you have, what's her name? Valentina recruiting Yelena, and that leads directly into the Hawkeye show. So right now, you're seeing a general synergy, because let's not pretend, right, going back to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where Sharon Carter is revealed to be the power broker, let's not pretend that the, Phases 1 through 3 didn't have their own dangling post-credit scenes. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 had 5 post-credit scenes. Most, mainly 1 or 2 were going to be taken seriously. And the one that was supposed to be taken really seriously was the Adam Warlock one. And yes, I know James Gunn was, going to release Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in 2020 if a pandemic hadn't happened and if his firing hadn't happened. So it would have been, only 3 years later. But still, let's just, that didn't happen until 2023 where we got Adam Warlock. And also, the Doctor Strange Mordo thing never got picked up in the Infinity Saga. So even, without Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness not really picking up the Earth 616 Mordo, that thread never got picked up in the Infinity Saga. So there are post-credit scenes in the Infinity Saga that just don't get follow-ups. Most of them do. I think that's a point. That's a key point, but we'll get back to that later. So anyways, Black Widow, I think really solid. And you're noticing here with these first few projects in Phase 4 that most of those post-credit scenes are actually leading somewhere. I think that's an interesting thing. Shang-Chi, for example, had a post-credit scene with setting up the Avengers. Like, okay, there's a group, Wong and Bruce Banner and Carol Danvers. Okay, we're getting somewhere. And the last post-credit scene with the 10 Rings, that might be a future setup for much later down the line. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Then we get Eternals. And I think Eternals is one of the more egregious examples of this. I think Eternals, right, is where we get all these different things and different concepts that are getting set up. And to be fair to the MCU, if we did get Eternals 2, I think these things would have gotten picked up. And also Blade. Let's not forget about Blade. So Eternals is the first casualty of studio plans changing. Because if Eternals 2 and Blade happen, which those are 2 films I believe were in the plans. I do definitely believe were in the plans. Blade still is. And then it's just not happening. Then I think that those 2 post-credit scenes, whether or not you like Pip the Troll and Harry Styles in the MCU, I think those 2 things would have gotten picked up. So we're getting some stumbles here. Spider-Man No Way Home is just the trailer to Doctor Strange the Multiverse of Madness, so that's fine. But, other MCU films in the Infinity Saga did that as well. I think Captain America the First Avenger was basically just a trailer for the Avengers. So it's happened, and it's fine. It's not the best thing, but it's fine. Also Venom, but again, I think Venom... That's to be determined, right? That depends on what they're going to do in Doomsday, Secret Wars, and Spider-Man 4. So there's that. Moon Knight was another kind of egregious example where the post-credit scene was basically, I think it was Jake Lockley, right, was the post-credit scene, was sort of what, the series should have been about, and it just wasn't. So that was another glaring kind of example there. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is another dangling plot thread of Clea. Where the heck is Clea? Nobody knows. Miss Marvel, that post-credit scene led into the Marvels, so there's that. It was actually a scene directly from the Marvels, which is a good thing. Thor: Love and Thunder, though, has 2 dangling post-credit scenes. One with Jane in Valhalla, which I don't know if we'll ever get that picked up, and the other one being, of course, Hercules, Roy Kent. Brett Goldstein playing Hercules, and that never really gets picked up. I don't remember if She-Hulk had a post-credit scene. I actually don't think so. I could be wrong. Maybe I just completely forgot about it, so apologies. No, I am wrong. Wong taking Abomination out of the prison. That was the post-credit scene. That never really went anywhere. So, yeah, another dangling plot thread. And then we move on here. We got Black Panther Wakanda Forever. The post-credit scene for that film was actually, I think that was just the end of the film, which is a really strange thing. It was T'Challa Jr., T'Challa II. And I feel like it could have been a part of the end of the film, but I think the end of the film was beautiful enough that I'm willing to give that a pass. So, that ends out Phase 4. Phase 5 has been interesting, right? We started with Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and that one is just a casualty of the Kangs, right? It's the Kang Dynasty, and then it's Loki Season 2, which I think the Loki Season 2 one, to be fair, was really solid. And then we get to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and it's the new Guardians team, so that's sort of a dangling thing that doesn't really get picked up anywhere else. Secret Invasion, I did not have a post-credit scene, so nothing much to talk about there. And then the Marvels, the post-credit scenes for the Marvels, that was the Beast thing, and who knows if that's ever going to get picked up at any point at any time. And then the other show, Loki Season 2, I don't think had a post-credit scene, so there is that. And then we head into Echo. I think Echo's post-credit scene was leading into Daredevil Born Again with Kingpin. And then now we're in 2023, Deadpool and Wolverine. The post-credit scenes there were basically jokes, right? There was the joke scene about Deadpool and Human Torch. And then Agatha All Along, I don't think had a post-credit scene. And now we're up to Captain America, Brave New World. So here's the thing, right? And I go through this exercise, to kind of give us all a recap. But also to say this, I actually don't think the post-credit scenes in themselves are the problem here. Like, I don't think Marvel is intention or somehow the quality of the post-credit scenes themselves, the kinds of content that they're putting in there, is actually what's making the post-credit scenes seem so disjointed. I honestly believe these post-credit scenes are a byproduct, a casualty of two specific things that the MCU has been struggling with thus far. One, mostly in its control, and one, I would say, out of its control. Number one is the quantity, right? The quantity of projects that Marvel has had. Because let's face it, if you cut down this list, right? Like, for example, Marvel used to release 3 movies a year. So let's just go with the first 3 to 4 projects of the MCU. Or let's just go with the first 6. So let's say 2 years, right? WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and Eternals, right? If you had those films across 2 years, and let's just say they were all films, and those post-credit scenes, it would be fine. Because we'd be like, okay, so WandaVision's going to set up something in Doctor Strange, and Shang-Chi, kind of Avengers team showing up here, and Power Broker for Sharon Carter. So I think, number one, is quantity, right? Because the thing about the post-credit scenes in the Infinity Saga was that, yes, they may not have paid off necessarily for a long period of time, but that long period of time was rewarded because in terms of actual projects that go on within the MCU, it wasn't that many. For example, the post-credit scene of Doctor Strange or of Captain America: Civil War for Black Panther wasn't paid off until Black Panther in 2018, right? But the number of projects between Captain America: Civil War and Black Panther was maybe 4, right? And another example is Doctor Strange in 2016 pays off in a year later for Thor Ragnarok. So you're like a whole year. That's a long time. But there are only, I think, 3 projects between Doctor Strange and Thor Ragnarok. So it feels earned, right? Those things feel very earned. Captain America: Winter Soldier, same thing. You have to wait a year for Avengers: Age of Ultron to be set up. So there's a very there's an intentionality about where these post-credit scenes are being placed because there's a lot of distance between these 2 projects. And I think the 2 projects that are being referenced. And I think that, just based on the quantity alone, right, of these projects in the MCU thus far, it's making the post-credit scenes feel diluted, right? Because let's say for the Hercules one, right, Thor, Thor Love and Thunder, you get the Hercules one, and then let's say you get a Thor 5 a few years later, and there are only maybe 4 or 5 projects between, then you're like, okay, it's fine. The fact that we don't, we're not even going to get a Thor 5, it looks like for a long time, if ever, makes that post-credit scene feel weird. Because the other thing, right, I said the first factor was quantity. The second thing is just the fact that the projects have been shuffled around. And I think that that's something that's more out of Marvel's control because the quantity thing, I think Marvel can get more in line. And I think that these post-credit scenes now in 2025, say what you will about the quality of it and the green screen of it all and the leader and whatnot, but that is a post-credit scene that is directly tying into Doomsday. And yes, it is anticlimactic. Yes, it's not the best one, but it's sort of akin to Avengers: Age of Ultron, where it's Thanos saying, I'll do it myself. That's kind of what this post-credit scene is, and it's going to lead directly into Doomsday. I think that the Thunderbolts post-credit scene will do the same. I think that the Fantastic Four one will obviously do the same, just like how Thor Ragnarok was one of the last films before Infinity War, and the last post-credit scene was basically a lead into the first scene of Infinity War, right? So I think that that's another thing that's just sort of out of Marvel's control. I don't think Marvel anticipated Eternals bombing so much, and frankly, I don't get it because I really like Eternals, but I get it. I mean, I get it in the sense that it's people are entitled to their own opinions. So, anyways, I think the post-credit scenes need to be rethought a little bit because Marvel is not dealing with the same thing, right? Marvel's not dealing with, oh, of course we're going to pay this thing off in a year and it's going to be fine. Marvel has to understand that, they have their projects lined up for a couple years, and the characters that are referenced in these post-credit scenes may never come back. And I think that that's the point that they need to reemphasize is that, look, if you're going to do a post-credit scene, you need to make sure what you're referencing will be paid off in the near future. Because now, I think the problem is with the amount of quantity that you have, there are just too many dangling plot threads that are not going to be resolved. I think that's really, to me, the bottom line of all this. So I'm glad that the Captain America: Brave New World's post-credit scene is going to reference a film that's going to come out in about a year. But I hope that continues on for the MCU because I think we're dealing with a different landscape now with the TV shows and movies. But what do you think about all these different post-credit scenes? And do you think Marvel has a problem with them, or do you think it's totally fine? Let me know in the comments down below.